you guys doing? We make it through the snow and the ice. Did anybody fall down out there? Hopefully not. I know it's real slick. I've fallen down, so there's that. Just like Caleb said, this time of year, everybody likes to evaluate. We like to talk about what our New Year's resolutions are. You ever have those people in your life that they're always like hitting their habits that they want to create? They're just perfect at their habits. I am, if I can brag a little bit about myself, I'm great at habits, just not necessarily the ones that I want. I'm really good at them, but just not I'm really good at eating the extra donut or like waking up in the middle of the night and be like, you know what, there's pie in the fridge. That habit I've got down. I'm really, really skilled at that one. But what we know about habits is that the habits that we keep actually keep us. When we actually allow habits in our life, they form who we are. They move us in a direction. I'm going to talk about some habits that most of us probably are part of, and this is terrifying. We're just going to throw one out there. Let's talk about typical cell phone users. The typical cell phone user touches their phone. Any guesses? How many times a day do you think? A million. It's pretty close. Not quite there. But the typical cell phone user touches their phone 2,617 times a day. If you've read something about creating and forming habits, you've probably read some numbers like you have to do something every day for like 21 days or a month or 40 days or whatever it is. 2,617 times a day we touch our phones on average. That's crazy. Most people on average spend 3 hours and 15 minutes on their phones each day. It's about 13.5% of your day, of your life. That's nuts. I don't like to read that. I don't like to think about that. And yet I know that I'm squarely right in the middle of that, just like everybody else. I know that there's some negative aspects of those things. It's not just about the habit, it's about the repercussions of the habit. I know that communication as a whole, you have a decreased ability to communicate clearly and effectively when you're always on your phone. Like it lessens your ability to communicate clearly. This might be my problem. Studies show that short-term memory as well as problem solving is dramatically affected, adverse effects because of an addiction to your cell phone. There's more negativity, there's more stress in your life. Emotional recovery in children directly correlates with phone usage. There's a link to obesity. The more you use your phone, the greater risk that you are at obesity. There's also, and this is one of the most terrifying, there's very, very clear evidence that cell phone usage and a cell phone addiction is connected to clinical depression. Now, think of our world in terms of what I just described. There's more and more people on their phones more and more often. I mean, think of all the people that just got a phone for Christmas. Maybe you did. Congratulations. And now you probably feel super guilty about it. You're welcome. But, I mean, think about the effect that this has on our society. Habits that we allow, right? This is what we're talking about. What you tolerate becomes what you expect. What you tolerate and allow in your life becomes an expectation. It becomes something that you're comfortable with. I mean, this ultimately is talking about boundaries and guardrails. We use that term quite a bit around here. And the thing about guardrails is guardrails are not placed in the danger zone. They're placed well in advance of the danger zone because if you're bumping up against it, you shouldn't be in danger. You need to be safe before you get to the danger area. And if you have an aspect or some aspects in your life when you're evaluating this time of year, you're like, okay, I need to get my finances. I need to get my, I need to get my health, my physique figured out. I need to do some of these other things. I need to read more. That's always one on my list. If there's an aspect of that that's just repeat, you might have a boundary. You might have a guardrail that is misplaced. Or maybe it's not existent at all. Here's a few other things that we know about disciplines. Disciplines and these habits that we're talking about, it's not just about us. Like we think about our own personal development, but every single one of us is connected to a circle of people around us. I mean, I immediately think of my son, and my habits affect my son. They're not just my own. My disciplines are not just mine. My disciplines are connected to my son's experience in life, who he sees as a father, what he experiences at home. That's all connected to my decision to implement patterns of behavior in my life. So here's the pathway. Disciplines are the evidence of your values. Ultimately, you can say that you have values, you can say that certain things are important to you, but until there's a discipline, until there's an action, a behavior that's on repeat behind it, then it's just a good idea. It's just an intention. It's just a great poster or bumper sticker is all it is until there's disciplines behind it. Values are reinforced by consistency. So you can decide to have a value, and you can even start to implement some disciplines behind it. But until the discipline becomes a habit, it's inconsistent. That consistency reinforces the value. It solidifies it as part of who you are, part of who you want to become. And finally, this consistency moves you in a direction. Because ultimately, when we talk about patterns, when we talk about behaviors, this is the whole idea. We want to move in a direction. We want to become a specific type of person. When we think about it this way, let's say that everybody in this room decided we wanted to go to see the ocean, which would be great. That'd be so much fun. We should all do that sometime. But we decided Pacific Ocean. That's obviously clear. At the beginning, we got to go to the same ocean. But if we're going to go on a trip to the ocean and none of us knew how to get there, if we just continue to make the decision to move west, if it was just like, I don't know what it's going to look like when we get there. I don't know the individual exact steps that I'm going to have to take. But if each decision that I make is in the direction of west, eventually we would watch the waves crash on the beach. When you decide a consistent decision over and over, a consistent behavior over and over in your life, it moves you in a direction. Now, this is all great, and this is all, this is great news, beginning of the year, right? We got to get this all started right. I understand that. Here's the problem. This is the major problem that I see, it's in me too. So as I'm preaching and I've been working on this message, this is just as about myself as much as anybody else. That the more exhausted you are, the less likely you are to be disciplined. How many times do you talk to people and when you ask, you actually check in on them and they give you a legitimate, like authentic answer? How many times do they tell you like, yeah, I'm tired and I'm exhausted. I'm busy. We all say that. I say that on repeat. I'm busy, I'm tired. Busy, tired. That's how I'm doing. I'm busy and tired. That doesn't lend itself to healthy disciplines. The more exhausted you are, the less likely you are to be disciplined. It's like playing basketball. I used to love to play I still love to play basketball. I'm just not quite the same player I used to be. I was a 3-and-D player, meaning that I could shoot from outside and I played defense. I love playing defense because I love to be able to shut somebody down and make their offense just frustrated. Because it's all about will. It's like, I'm going to beat you. You're right in front of me, and I'm not going to let you beat me. I'm going to beat you. The thing about defense, though, is it's all about discipline. You have to be incredibly disciplined with your footwork, with your eye, your focus, everything. And the more tired I ever got when I was playing basketball, the less disciplined I was, and the more often that the offensive player would beat me. It's exhaustion. It's tiredness doesn't allow us to be disciplined as much as we would like to be. Now, I was listening to a podcast the other day, and this is one of I kind of circle back around to it every once in a while. It's the Carey Nieuwhof Leadership Podcast. And he had Clay Scroggins. These guys, both of them used to be pastors in the North Point Network of Churches. Now they're kind of both leadership gurus. They write books and all kinds of stuff. But they were on this podcast, and they're talking about this idea of being tired. This is what Carey actually had to say. He says, time off won't heal you when the problem is how you spend your time on. Carey, actually, if you know a little bit about his story, he got to a point where he was clinically depressed. He couldn't get out of bed. He was contemplating suicide, and he's a pastor at a mega church. Like, he was so down and out because he was so exhausted. He was so worn down. So many factors in his life they were non-existent of what should have been. And he recognized that it wasn't time off that could heal him. That's not what could save. That's like a Band-Aid on like an arm that got amputated. Like, that's not going to work. It might help for a brief moment, but the exact moment that you step back into, you get back from your week of vacation, you get back into it, and what happens? Everything is still there. All of the problems, all of the issues, all of the struggles, all of the frustrations have not left. They're still there. In fact, when you left, you probably left some of those undone, like your workload wasn't quite finished up enough, and now it's increased while you've been gone. So now you're even more stressed out trying to catch up than you were before. Now, I'm not saying that vacations are bad. I love vacations. We're going to talk about that in just a second. But this is also what Clay said. A vacation is not the solution for an unsustainable pace. This is the point. An unsustainable pace. An unsustainable pace. And so often we feel the tension that we have to do enough to earn our way. I struggle with that a lot. I feel like I have to do enough to prove that I earned whatever I have in my life. And when you only focus on earning and keeping and that struggle and that tension, if you don't take time off, if you don't figure out a pace that you can sustain for a long time, you're going to become a lesser version of yourself. You're not going to be as good of a husband. You're not going to be as good of a father. You're not going to be as good of a friend, a family member. All of our relationships lack. Our leadership lacks. Our ability to be the student that we want to be lacks when we're exhausted, when we're tired, when we haven't figured out the sustainable pace part. So this morning we're talking about two different things, and I'm not by any means, I'm not a genius. I'm not a super smart guy. I just have some thoughts that I'm going to share with you. And these are two ideas that I had when I was thinking about exhaustion. I feel like both of these ideas are very connected to your level of exhaustion. So the first thing is pace. Your pace that which you move in life is absolutely connected to your exhaustion. If you think about it in terms of, like if you decided you wanted to run a marathon, great on you, good on you. But the preparation for a marathon, the practice for a marathon, the preparation and all of that, there's very intentional things that you need to do when you're training for a marathon. Each and every day you have to decide how far you're going to run. That's not by accident. That's not by chance. You're not just going to step out the door and just be like, I don't know how far I'm going to run. I'm just going to run until I stop. Maybe it's going to be a full marathon, a half marathon. I don't know. No, there's an end result. You know the exact ending, how long you're going to run. Secondly, you're going to pre-decide if you're training for a marathon, you should predetermine how fast you're going to run, what your pace is going to be. You're also going to decide if you're going to take breaks. And that sounds, for me, as competitive as I am, taking a break sounds the opposite of what I should be doing. But what I've learned and what I've seen is that when you take breaks, you're able to do more. You're able to do more efficiently and effectively of what you started out, what your end goal was to begin with. Taking breaks helps in figuring out how long of a break that you're going to take. So I'm going to take a break after 5 miles. I'm going to take a minute rest. I'm going to walk that or whatever, and I'm going to continue on for the rest of the duration, whatever it might be. But this is also true in our pace of life. It's not just marathons. It's also the pace of life. So a couple questions that kind of correlate with what I just went over. How much can you handle? Both of these questions are challenging. How much time do you have to accomplish that? These are questions about our pride, our self-awareness, our ability to see accurately what we can and cannot do. And if you're like me, you take on way more than you should. You're like, yeah, I can do that. I can definitely do that. Yeah, just keep on piling it on. I can do that. No, I've got enough time. I can do that. If you don't see yourself accurately, if you don't see your calendar accurately, if you don't see where you're at in your abilities accurately, if you're not self-aware, you're going to add too much on. And eventually, when you add too much on, eventually you're going to get exhausted and something's going to give. And unfortunately, it's not always the thing that should give. Like we hope that the thing that gives is the bottom of the totem pole, like the bottom level, like the thing that doesn't really matter that much. But often the thing that gives is the most important. Our relationships, our family, our priority relationships that we have suffer the most when we're undisciplined in these categories of pace. Here's just a freebie for you. You can write this down and make a bumper sticker, whatever you want. Discipline is a decision to paddle upstream. And we're talking about pace. When you're talking about the decision of what pace you're going to move at life, this is a hard one. Because you know you the best. You should, at least. But sometimes we see ourselves inaccurately. And in order to be disciplined in pace, this is not the direction that we float in, right? If you think about being on the river, you don't naturally move in the direction of discipline. You float in the opposite direction. You float in an unhealthy direction. And for some people, that's adding too much on. For some people, that's how you're undisciplined. It's not because you're not doing enough, it's because you're doing way too much. There's a whole other side of the spectrum, and this is the folks that you're like, I'm not going to do very much at all. Like I don't know if you feel like it's potentially like you just want to protect your time. You don't want to do it. Some people will call that lazy. I'm not going to call that lazy, but you figure that out for yourself. But like that's the spectrum, right? So either you have a group of people that are going to do way too much. This other side is going to do not nearly enough. They're like, yeah, I'm happy to stay home and play video games all day. Like that's what my goal is. I would say you need to up your goal a little bit, but that's just me. Paddling upstream is discipline. That's what this is all about. The other two questions about pace of life: how many breaks? So it's similar to the marathon training. How many breaks are you going to take, and how long are they? So this is talking about a system essentially that you can implement into your life to make sure that you create a pattern of behavior, a pace, if you will, of time on, time off. Being able to allow the longevity of, I can take a break, I can take a breath when I need to, rather than just nose to the grindstone all the time. So this has been mine. And again, I'm not good at this. I'm not good at this. I work to be better at it, but this is the direction I try and move in. So for me, this is just an example of what you can do. I try every single day to take just a very short period of time, but a time to myself, where I'm not doing something. I'm not doing something for work. I'm not doing something for somebody else. I'm breathing. That's what I'm doing. I'm relaxing. I'm catching my breath. So I try to do that once a day. It doesn't have to be a long time, but just a little bit of time where I'm breathing. Secondly, once a week, I try to take a day off, where again, I'm not working on my craft. I'm not working on my stuff. I'm actually trying to step away from all of the things that life is yelling at me to do. So I'm actually taking time out, and maybe some of that might be like hobby things, where I'm taking a day to do something I enjoy doing, to creating something that I don't normally get the opportunity to do, but I prioritize that. I take a day once a week to try to do this. For me, it's typically Friday or Saturday if I can work it in my schedule. And sometimes I'll take Luke and we'll just leave the valley. I love the valley. I also love looking at the valley from a distance. There's something different about the air, right? You can breathe differently when you're away from it. And then when you come back to it, you love it as much, if not even more. But getting some time away. The other thing, the next step for me is once a quarter, I try and take a weekend away. Same idea. So once a day, a little bit of time. Once a week, try and take a day. And then once a quarter, I try to take a weekend where I'm not doing what I typically do. I've set myself separate from from a normal pace of life, and I just breathe deep. And then once or twice a year, I try and take extended time off. And those are the times where, I'll tell you a real quick story. We'll call him a mentor. He was telling me how great his 2-week vacation was and how I had to try it. And at the time, I was working at Columbia Electric, is a wholesale house here in town, and I was working in the warehouse, and I didn't have the ability to do that. I mean, I couldn't not work. I didn't have hours to not work. I didn't have vacation time. I didn't have the ability to. And here he is telling me, like, you've got to take 2 weeks off. I'm like, you going to pay my mortgage? Like, that doesn't mean, like, that's a great intention. Thank you so much for that. Yes, 2 weeks off sounds wonderful. Not a possibility for me. I left actually angry at that point. I was like, what do you know what I'm doing. Why would you even say that? Okay. Now, the whole point that he was trying to communicate to me was there's something that happens in us when we've had extended time to not be working, to not be, our focus is not focused on something else. It's focused inwardly, finally, when we get the opportunity to breathe deep and reprioritize what's important. When you do that, you become a better version of yourself. So I'm all for vacations, but I'm not for vacations being the fix all to the problem, because the problem is so much about pace. And when we talk about pace, we have to work into our pace the time away and the time off. It's not just a Band-Aid to cover the wound. It's something that's part of the system as a whole. So we've talked about pace. One last thought about pace. If you want a biblical example, Jesus is the biblical example. Like Jesus, over and over and over again, he would take time off. He would take time away. He would step away by himself and sometimes with some of his closest disciples. He would step away from all the chaos of everything else happening. And when he did that, it wasn't because he was so exhausted. He was preparing himself to continue to be the best version of himself. He needed to be away in order to be on even better. So, as Jesus, I'll let you figure out with that. Other than pace, the other part of this is purpose. And I think that we miss this often. We think a big purpose in our life is going to cost us more. But if you don't have purpose in your life, you flounder. If you don't have purpose in your life, it's like you're just wandering around in a circle and you just get frustrated over and over again. You get bored with what you're doing. And life gets a lot less fun if you don't have purpose, if there's not a direction that you're moving in. So here's the question. Have you prioritized purpose in your life? Like, have you actually sat down and thought, what's my purpose? And how do I accomplish it? What can I do? You see, purpose is the result of a clear vision. You don't stumble upon it. You have to have an idea. I'm going to move in this direction. I'm going to become this type of person. I'm going to do this because this value is so important. I will not let my life not move in that direction. Purpose is the result of a clear vision for yourself. Now we're going to look at a story in the Bible. This is one of my favorite stories. It's in the Old Testament. This is about Elijah. If you know, Elijah was one of the prophets in the Old Testament. There's another guy that has a very similar name, Elisha, the way that you keep them apart. Elijah was first before Elisha because they're alphabetical. That's my secret. Don't tell anybody else. But Elijah is the prophet in the Old Testament. And if you read through, it's incredible what he did and what he was a part of, and all the stories are amazing. At this point where we're going to look at, Elijah had actually prophesied that there's going to be a drought, and that happened 3 years ago, and then there's a drought for 3 years. So no one's really happy. If there's a drought in the land, nobody is happy. The problem with all of this, the reason why there's a drought, the reason why there's like this judgment on the land was because the nation of Israel had actually moved away from following God. The king himself had actually married a queen from a different land, and she had brought all of her gods with her and all of her practices with her. They'd torn down some of the altars that had been set up to sacrifice for God, and they'd actually put up other altars for Baal, like this other god. So not healthy, not a good spot. That's why prophets rose up in the history of Israel, was to correct the ship, like to correct the course, right the ship, and get everybody back in line and back in order, moving back in the direction of God. So we're going to pick up 1 Kings chapter 18, verse 21. Elijah went before the people and said, "How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him, but if Baal is God, follow him." But the people said nothing. So essentially, he's like, hey, you got two options. Just choose an option, but choose the best option. Make sure that it's intentional. If you're going to implement these things in your life, it better be on purpose, and it better be because you believe wholeheartedly. Now, Elijah, kind of part of the story, there's 450 prophets of Baal at this time. It's him on the other side. And he has like an offering off. He makes this challenge. He's like, okay, all of you guys, you get a bull, and we're going to make a sacrifice. You're going to make a sacrifice. I get a bull, like an animal bull, and I'm going to make a sacrifice. And we're going to see which God actually consumes our sacrifice with fire. And whichever God does that is the one true God. So, jumping ahead to verse 27. At noon, Elijah began to taunt them. Shout louder, he said. Surely he is a god. Perhaps he is deep in thought, or busy, or traveling. Maybe he is sleeping and must be awakened. If you didn't know that there's trash talking in the Bible, example A. Like, I love the idea. Like, this takes me back to my basketball days. Like, he's talking trash. So they shouted. They listened. They're like, oh, yeah, you're probably right. They shouted louder and slashed themselves with swords and spears, as was their custom, until their blood flowed. Now, if this doesn't make any sense at all to you, let me explain this real quick. So at this time, historically, pagan religions, this was a common occurrence. When you try to sacrifice enough, whether it's an animal or whether it's grain offerings or whatever it might be, and God doesn't move on your behalf, you figure that you need to do more. Apparently, he's not hearing you. That's why he's telling him to shout louder. Oh, he just can't hear you. It's volume. Volume's the key. Just a side note, volume's not the key to allow God to hear you. But it gets to this point where they move further and further to the last thing that they have to offer is their own life source. Like, look at how much I am willing to sacrifice for you. Would you just listen to me? Would you pay attention to me? Would you see me? I mean, this is hand in hand with why also, child sacrifice was prevalent at this time as well, because there's nothing else left to give. So you give what's more and more valuable, more and more important. Anyway, So he taunts them to the point that they have nothing left. They're doing everything they possibly can in order to get Baal to listen to them. Midday passed, and they continued their frantic prophesying until the time for the evening sacrifice. But there was no response. No one answered. No one paid attention. Now it's Elijah's turn, verse 30. Then Elijah said to all the people, "Come here to me." They came to him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord, which had been torn down. Verse 31. Elijah took 12 stones, one for each of the tribes descended from Jacob, to who the word of the Lord had come, saying, "Your name shall be Israel." With the stones, he built an altar in the name of the Lord, and he dug a trench around it large enough to hold 2 seahs of seed. This is about like 24 pounds of seed. So this is not just like a little tiny baby. This is a large moat that's around this altar. He arranged the wood, cut the bull into pieces, and laid it on the wood. Then he said to them, "Fill 4 jars with water and pour it on the offering on the wood." "Do it again," he said, and they did it again. "To do it a 3rd time," he ordered, and they did it the 3rd time. The water ran down around the altar and even filled the trench. How familiar are you with starting a fire? A little bit, like hopefully if you have a wood stove, you've been using it in the cold. Water is not friendly to starting a fire. Elijah's making this so obvious that there's no, like, he can't accidentally like have a lighter in his pocket and be like, whoops, got it. Like, that's not the case. This isn't going to automatically light. He could dump a whole pack of matches on it. All of those things don't exist at this time. But he could have done that and it still would not have lit. He's making it so ridiculous that it has to be absolutely a very clear miracle that something happens. At the time of the sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and prayed, "Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel and that I am your servant and have done these things at your command. Answer me, Lord. Answer me so these people will know that you, Lord, are God and that you are turning their hearts back again." Purpose, right? This is the whole thing. This is why Elijah stepped up. 1 verses 450, he decided, I don't even care anymore. Like, my life is in danger by doing this, and I'm not going to care because it's so important, it's so critical that I do something about this. Verse 38. Then the fire of the Lord fell and burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and the soil, and also licked up the water in the trench. Everything is consumed. That's a hot fire. That is one hot fire. When all the people saw this, they fell prostrate and cried, "The Lord, he is God. The Lord, he is God." Purpose drives us to do something more. And if we don't have purpose in our life, we're lost. If we don't have purpose in our life, we're bored. If we don't have purpose in our life rings empty and hollow. We feel like there's so much more out there, but we're not going to engage with it. And life gets worse. Life is not as much fun. Elijah, his purpose was probably unfun. To right the ship, to redirect an entire nation back on course. That's not a fun purpose. Like, the things that he had to endure were not fun. Yet, it drove him to succeed and to do incredible things. If there isn't a goal at the end, you won't stick with it, and you can't celebrate when you have achieved it. If you don't know like where the end line is, if you don't have this goal in mind, I'm going to do this. It's not about working out more. It's about getting healthy physically. So if that's not the goal, like if you don't have the clear goal, I want to do this. If you don't have the goal, when you cross the line, you're not going to be able to celebrate it. You have to have a clear goal. And if you don't have a goal also, you'll do it for a little while and then you'll stop. You'll get bored of it. Something else will pop up and you'll get out of the pattern of behavior that you wish you were in. This is why New Year's resolutions are so difficult, right? Because we don't stick with it. We don't have a clear vision of the goal and we don't go along with it, because the goal is not just to work out every single day. The goal is to improve our health, right? It's a directional goal more than it is anything else. Now, we're going to talk about church because you're here, and I think this is as important as anything in this world, to be honest with you. What you are currently experiencing here at Canyons is not the goal. Like this in this room, I love it. I love what we do. The band was awesome this morning. I love what we get to do. I love this. This is not the end goal. This is not, we haven't arrived yet. The goal of Canyons is so much more. There's around 40,000 people in our own community that feel like they're far from God. They feel like they don't know God. They're not part of any religion. They would say that they're far from God. That is our target. That is our goal. You know, it takes a lot of people to do what we're trying to do. It does. What we're doing right now takes a lot of people. What we want to do takes even more people, because we want to provide an opportunity for people that feel like they're far from God to step into an environment where they feel welcomed, comfortable, where they can cross the line of faith or take a step towards God, or maybe just decide, you know what, maybe I'm just not quite as solid on my thinking as I once thought I was. Like they start to question and give God a chance in their life. If you want to boil down our mission, like to the irreducible minimum, it's inspire people to follow Jesus. Like that's it. That's what we're trying to do. All people. And to inspire people to follow Jesus isn't just about getting people from other churches to come to this church, which it takes church people to do church. You guys, if you've been around church, you know that. But our focus, our goal is to create an environment where so much more we're preparing for who's not here yet. Not just who is here, but who's not here yet. Here's the strategy. There's 3 prongs. First of all, to love our community, to connect with our audience, and involve our core. To love our community, you see this on a hopefully regular basis with 4LCV. This is all about making sure that our community knows, 1, that we exist, that we're here. 2, that they're happy that we're here. And 3, hopefully their life is better because we exist and we're here. One of my greatest joys is when I hear someone say something to that effect that doesn't even go to church. Oh yeah, I've heard of you guys. I love what you guys do. I love that. So that's the first part, to love our community. Second part is to connect with our audience. That is to create something, whether it be on a Sunday morning, or maybe it's a night of worship, or maybe it's a women's group event, or maybe it's, some other event that we do, to create experiences that people are able to actually have a good time and enjoy the fact that they showed up. And hopefully that they invite someone to come back with them, that they want to come back, and then they invite somebody to come back with them. That's like the cherry on top. Some of you, that's your story. Someone experienced something here, wherever it may be, and they invited you to join in. And it changed your life forever. That's huge. So we want to connect with our audience in that way and create experiences for them in order for them to come on back and hopefully bring somebody else with us. And finally, to involve the core. And this is our 4 things that we talk about on a regular basis. This is to serve, to give, to join in community, and to invest and invite in relationships with people that aren't here yet. Now, let's get to the nitty-gritty here. We're at a level of sustaining what we do week in and week out. I get it. Honestly, we can do this. What we're doing, we can do this. What we want to do, the direction that we want to move in, we can't do that yet. It takes more. It takes more. And I know I'm going to ask you to do some things, and you're going to have to evaluate whether you want to listen or not, and that's fine. This is always, it can be semi-uncomfortable for me to ask, but it's too important for me to not ask. Because the goal is not to do what we're currently doing. The goal is to do more. 40,000 people aren't going to fit in this building. That's the direction we're moving, though. That is our heart. We want to impact more and more people, not because we want more numbers, but because we want more hearts to be connected to a Heavenly Father. That's what we want. That's the whole goal. That's the whole point of all of this. So what's that going to require? I mean, it's going to require the 4 things. If you call Canyons Church your home, if this is where you go, if this is what you're part of. Now, if you just showed up for the first Sunday, like this, you're just first time here this morning, you just take a breather. Like you can enjoy the donuts that are coming in the front room with me in a little bit if you'd like. But the rest of you, if you call this your home, I'm going to ask you some difficult questions. If you don't give here at Canyons Church, yet you go to Canyons Church, why? Like, really, what's the reason? What is the reason that you don't give here at Canyons Church? I talk about generosity a lot because I believe that generosity, and this is what God says also, this is what Jesus believed too, that the chief competitor for your heart, which is all what Jesus and God are, they're all about getting your heart. The chief competitor for your heart is your stuff. Money is not the root of all evil. The love of money, the love of your things, the things that get in the way of you moving in the direction are the things that you try to cling on to. So when it comes to generosity, I'm all about being generous because that gets rid of that greed, if you want to call it that. That gets rid of the things that bump up in between you and your relationship with God. But if you call this your home church, if this is what you're a part of, then the question is, why aren't you giving? Like, why haven't you engaged that way? And I don't mean to say that to cast guilt. I just want you to intentionally make a decision. Like, am I part of this or not? And if you are part of this, think about funding it. Because again, it's not about what you're experiencing right now, but it's about who's going to walk in those doors that's eventually going to get here, that's going to be impacted. We're moving in a direction, and we need to fund that direction. We can survive on what we're doing right now, but that is not the end goal. In addition to finances, serving, your time, your energy, I know it costs you something. Following Jesus costs you something. This is not about showing up on a Sunday morning and consuming some content, feeling good about yourself, singing some worship songs, and then going on with your day. You're like, man, that was great. That really filled me up. That's good. That's a good thing. But that's not all that following Jesus is about. Following Jesus will absolutely cost you something. And some of it is costing you time and your energy. And the thing is, when you are willing to give some of that, God gives you even more. This is what I talk about purpose. In my experience, and I've done this volunteer for many, many years, and then I've been privileged and honored to be able to be on staff at a church for a while now. Both cases are true. When you are able to leverage what God has given you, you find energy more. You find a different level of contentment. You might be tired, but you're also at peace. It's weird how that works. And it's amazing. You find yourself at a different spot than you would be otherwise. My heart breaks because we don't have a student ministry right now. That's what I started with student ministry. That's what I love with student ministry. That's what my experience was with student ministry. And there's a reason why we can't do it right now. One, we don't have the volunteers, and two, I believe that it needs a paid staff position. We don't have the funding for that either. That needs to change, and it's going to change. And my ask is, are you willing to join in order to make a difference with your time and with your finances, with inviting people to come and be a part of this, with joining in community when you have an opportunity to? Would you do that with us here? The thing about Elijah, kind of the end of that part of the story, Elijah leaves. He has the 450 prophets killed, so there's that. And then he leaves. The queen, that those were her prophets, right? Not super happy about that. So she decides, she puts a hit out on Elijah. She's like, that's it, you're done. So he goes and hides, which I think is, it's kind of comical to me. Like, he just did this miracle. God shows up, consumes everything, the water, the rocks, everything, the soil, everything's consumed. He just witnessed that, and then he's going to go hide because a queen says that he's going to be, she's going to get him. But in this moment that Elijah has, he ends up talking to God. God's found, it's a whole story, you should read it, but God is found in a whisper, right? So it's not in the earthquake that happens. He's in a mountain, like in a cave. He's not in the earthquake. He's not in the wind. He's in the whisper. And when Elijah starts to discuss and dialogue with God, he starts to complain. He's like, God, I'm the only one left. I'm all by myself. I can't do this alone. Poor pity me. And God says, hey, Elijah, there's 7,000 people that have not knelt before that false god. I have people. I just need you to do what I've asked you to do. God is preparing with more and for more then you know. I'm not so arrogant to think that God's only using Canyon's church, but I am absolutely confident that God is using Canyon's church to make an impact in this community, that 40,000 number would be impacted. That maybe in a year it'd be 39,000, maybe in 2 years it'd be 35,000. That there would be a dramatic impact left on this community because of what we're able to do. So the final thought that I have for you is, when we're talking about pace, when we're talking about purpose, choose to prioritize what you value. And then choose to be part of someone's story. Because this is the reality. Every single person in here, whether you believe in Jesus, whether you don't, whether you've been part of a church forever or this is your first time in the building, wherever you're at on a faith journey, every single person in this room has been impacted by somebody else. And you can point back to probably a handful or multiple handfuls of people that have positively impacted you. They've changed the course. They've changed the direction of your life. And if you had the chance, you would tell them. And if you do have the chance, you should tell them, thank you for your impact in my life. People have been part of your story. This is your opportunity to be part of some other people's stories. They're not here yet. They're not in this room yet, but they're out there. And we're going to do whatever we possibly can to make an impact. Again, it's not about getting numbers. It's about moving hearts in the direction of a Heavenly Father that loved them so much that He sacrificed His own Son for them. That's what this is about. I love this, but this is not the end result. This is not the goal. It's so much more. Let me pray. We're going to close out today. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for all that you do for us. You bring people into our lives to redirect, to course correct, to encourage, to support. I pray that we would be people to do the same for others. That we would open the door for someone to take a step towards you. And we can do that intentionally. It doesn't happen accidentally, but by intention. That we would choose to be invested, that we would choose to be engaged, that we would choose to invite people to show up, that we would choose to be generous here, that we would choose to serve here, that we would choose to join in community. Those are choices that we can intentionally make. And God, I pray that you would move our hearts to yours. That what we do would be moved in your direction, and that more and more people would come to know how good and how big and how faithful and how loving and how gracious and how merciful you are. That you, the Creator, want relationship with the created, and you know us. We love you, God. We thank you that you first loved us. In your name we pray. Amen.